Lawrence Lewis is a member of the Weewaikai Nation, Cape Mudge, and is from Victoria, BC. In 2012, Lawrence launched a mobile technology startup called One Feather. One Feather is shifting the way First Nation communities engage, collaborate, and make important decisions governing their nation's future by using a smartphone. Over the past 20 plus years, Lawrence has been working with First Nations agencies, and all levels of government. Welcome, Lawrence! Mike Irvine is a pioneer in EdTech. While completing his master's in 2015, Mike made history by successfully defending his thesis live underwater. His company, Live It, is an online learning company. They are curriculum designers who combine trailblazing experts with live learning technologies and bring it to classrooms everywhere. Their aim is to democratize technology access and usability so as many people as possible can benefit from the excitement and learning they can bring. Welcome, Mike.
Hello. Oh, you're both wearing your hats too. Fantastic. There we go. So whoever's taking photos, take it now. So welcome. It's been a whole year and a mug. I was going to say, I have a mug too. Okay, let's pose slowly.
Should we do this? Okay, let's do this.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, pose. Awesome. We were supposed to do this a year ago, and then COVID hit. And the interview the students would have heard a year ago compared to now would have been quite different because your businesses have changed and you have actually found opportunity in moments in this pandemic years. But let's back things up a bit. I'd love to hear from each of you kind of where your businesses were at kind of prior to COVID hitting. You know, what did your business do prior to COVID? I'll start with Mike here. Yeah.
Sure. So prior to COVID, my organization would go out to remote locations. We'd work with different organizations, and we'd go, in some cases, up to the Arctic and do an underwater dive show. We would then live broadcast that into classrooms across Canada so that kids in their classrooms could ask questions while we're diving. So we'd wear this big full-face intercom mask, and we could talk to you while we're diving all around and checking out incredible marine environments. So that was before COVID.
Okay, and we'll get back to you about after COVID, kind of what happened, because there is no traveling right now. So, okay, over to you, Lawrence. How about you? What was your business?
Our business was working with First Nations across the country. So I would, like Mike, spend a lot of time traveling around the country, meeting and visiting First Nations communities, introducing them to the work that we do, and laying the groundwork for really meaningful, long-lasting relationships, and just building those friendships and those connections for sure.
Perfect. So then we share all the time in our Entrepreneurship 12 course that as much as obviously they learn about business, it's really the mindset. Learning to be able to pivot, being able to fail, being able to recreate or redirect their business in the ways that they see possible. And each of you weren't practicing that. You got to do that live when COVID hit. And I think, Mike, you were one of the first interviews I interviewed. And I was thinking, okay, I'm going to get on this call and it's all despair out there because that's what you see in the media. And you were probably the most excited person ever of the opportunities that kind of landed in your plate because of COVID. Can you share kind of what happened over this last year with your business?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been interesting because primarily we were an organization that would have to go to locations and broadcast it live to share that environment, that experience with those experts, out. And obviously now we can't travel. We had to really kind of pause and reflect and take a moment to assess, okay, what the heck are we going to do? And one of the main things that really came out is that, from that reflection and taking a look at what was happening overall in multiple industries and groups that we had been working with, we took our 3-year plan and turned it into a 3-week plan. And so essentially what that means is we had a big, crazy idea that eventually we were going to build a nature Netflix. So this would be a platform where it would have multiple different programs and shows that you could access, things like that. So how did we were going to even build that in the first place? We had to fast track, figure out how we're going to, create a website that can host the content. We had to rethink how are we going to interview our experts? How are we going to get the footage to put together these programs? And is it going to be live, or should we now try video on demand, but still keeping certain elements live, which are those Q&A components? And so, we asked our teachers, we did some due diligence and really dug into our market and double checked to make sure this was something that is going to work. And we took a risk. And essentially, we talked to multiple different organizations and groups, and what would take us months to create one program, all of a sudden we were able to create a program every week. I'm never going to do that again, but we were able to create 10 back-to-back weeks straight of free programs that we offered into schools, and it is what you call market validation. So we were able to test to see if this was something that was going to work and begin the basis of our Nature Netflix platform. Fast forward, here we are a year later, things are going really well. We actually found another niche, is that lots of organizations that had been working with schools and with kids, they didn't know how to go online. So that became another angle where we actually started supporting those organizations to converting their content into a format that would work for kids and teachers.
Well, I remember being on that call with you, and you were talking about how you got a call from IMAX, and you're like, we're a small company. IMAX called us. Like, how did that happen? And it's like, without COVID.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah, this kind of stuff wouldn't have happened. So over to you, Lawrence. I mean, same thing. You were initially a tech company that had many different services, but one of them was an election platform of some sort that you were taking into First Nations communities.
Electronic voting.
Yeah. And now it's fintech.
Yeah. It's fintech. I mean, when COVID first hit and things started to transition, we were incredibly anxious. Like, we're like, oh man, what is this going to mean? Because I have to say the initial sense in communities was a willingness to embrace the technology, but a hesitancy to actually dive in and make it happen. And so we're like, yeah, we want to do this, but we're going to take a slow, measured, cautious approach to how we do this. And we're going to take our time, and, we're going to sign on with you folks, and we're going to do this a little bit right now. And if it works well, we'll kind of build on it. And I think what COVID did was it forced folks to really shift their mental space in terms of digital technologies and their usefulness and how to embrace them. And so we went from a place of where we had to really go in and walk our clients through the safety, security of what we were doing, the technology of what we were doing, that whole architecture, if you like, to a place of, no, we just need to make it happen next week. And so, the lights are off. So, all of a sudden now we are accelerating what we're doing. We're not slowing down. And our clients, asking for more and more from us in terms of that digital solution for their, we work with, over 200 First Nations across the country, looking for digital solutions where they can meet the needs of their community, have really important decision making happen, move resources from them to their members, and from Canada through to the nation, through to their members. And so, in 2020, like from March to the end of 2020, December, we had almost 40,000 electronic ballots cast in a variety of voting events across the country. And so, this idea that electronic voting is we're years off from that. No, we've been doing that for 4 years now. And if anything, we're just building the business model or the case study that says, this is doable. It's there. It's not going anywhere. We've had nations where we did electronic voting on an event, and then the nation has come back and wanted to do another event. And they said, well, we won't do electronic voting for this event because it's smaller scale or it's different. And the community members are like, whoa, time out. No, this is how we do business now, and this is what we expect in the future. And, if anything, I think COVID is just, it's been a bit of an opportunity for us to help that psychology shift around digital solutions, embrace them, and allow us to build even more robust and helpful solutions for our Indigenous clients across the country, for sure.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that sometimes it takes time for people to transition and even adopt new ideas. But all of a sudden, something like COVID is like, we need to adopt them now or we're isolated. And exactly. So that is something that putting on the what type of mindset do you need as an entrepreneur for that? And it's really as a problem solver. I mean, you guys had this incubated amount of time, especially if you have people working for you. You can't not be in motion for very long before you have to start letting people go. And so I think that incubated amount of time forces you to have a deadline and forces you to be like, okay, we need to go in some direction of some sort soon, kind of thing. So I think of that even with our course, because our course is normally a semester long. And so they know by the end of the semester they have to present. And so there's this incubated amount of time of like, yes, you got all these different ideas, but you can't just keep floating ideas. You got to choose one and just run with it. Yep. So I think they can learn that from you guys, definitely. So what excites you the most about your businesses now? Because I guess because they've transferred, I know the initial building of a business is really exciting. So I'm sure after you got over the crisis moment of your business through COVID, what's the most exciting part of it right now? I'll start with you, Mike.
Ooh.
Yeah.
There's so many things happening.
I know. Yeah.
So one of the most exciting parts definitely is that I get to meet some incredible and inspiring people through every program that we go to create. There's opportunity to look into new subjects and content matter. We cover a series of stories from sea to space. So deep sea, underwater hydrothermal vents, which are underwater volcanoes, all the way to even covering a little bit of what SpaceX is doing and different research that's taking place that gets us, access to the stars. So definitely that is a highlight. And during this process and this transition through COVID, we've really kind of shifted to be more robust. We've grown our team exponentially. So we actually have 13 people now that are working and live it. And there's lots of new opportunities that are popping up as we go. So honestly, very grateful, but definitely because of the collaboration of the team and how we made this transition and really listening to our audience. And that gave us this chance to be where we are. So also, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. How about you, Lawrence? What excites you?
I get up every morning just tremendously grateful and thankful for the place and the space that I get to work and the things that we get to do. And as a business person and entrepreneur, just always being dialed into what excites you and makes you happy and motivates you is just so important. And, the opportunities of COVID allowed us to accelerate what we were doing. And it seems kind of weird to say the opportunities of COVID. I always feel like it's almost a bad thing to say, but that shift it opened up a whole bunch of doors. And so, Mike illustrated that he got a phone call that he hadn't expected. Some of the folks that we reached out early to for collaboration and partnership that we couldn't get a return phone call on are now phoning us saying, hey, can we do some business together? And so, if we hadn't just stayed the course and done the work that we thought was really important and gone down that path that we believed in, it shouldn't matter what happens, really, because that passion and that focus will get you through those things. And at the end of the day, we stayed the course, we did the work, we continued to do the heavy lifting and the grinding and all that hard stuff, all that heavy lifting. And those opportunities presented themselves. When they did, those doors flung open, and sometimes they sucked us through, or we were just able to walk through. But that's what really excites me is that sure, it's definitely a challenging time, and while we take the opportunities that we've been provided, and we take that, and we take the wealth that's generated from that, and the opportunities that are generated from that, and the employment opportunities that are created for that. I mean, we've grown our team to 16 people as well, like doubled in the last year. And we take those things and we transfer them back to our clients and to the users of our platform so that we're able to lift them up as well. And so even though, we're doing our part, I think, to help make this the best and make something good come out of this that our clients and the users of our platform and our focus in terms of that indigenous space that we're giving back and these are the things that excite me every day and just so inspired to come to work and do what we do for sure.
Fantastic. So that's all the good stuff and the inspiring stuff. What about some of the failures? Because I know that that's something we talk about a lot in our course about mindset, and it's hard to explain that failure is important and what does that mean? Do I just continue to fail kind of thing? But what for you guys have been some of the failures that you're kind of glad you had? along the way. Like Mike, have there been some failures, or is it all
Oh, always.
all
That's
successes?
just what comes with it.
Yeah.
Honestly, you just fail hard, fail fast is what you try to do.
Yeah.
So definitely, we've had a series of challenges. I guess kind of a funny way of putting it too is live is the epitome of Murphy's Law. It's anything that can go wrong will go wrong, and it definitely goes wrong, especially when you're doing live out in remote sites and locations, including in some cases the power goes out and you lose the satellite connection feed, and you're like, all right, how do we fix this one? So definitely those have been those challenges. I've had challenges within the business itself. This isn't my first company, so I've had others that I've been building up and working through. And there was barriers sometimes with people that we were collaborating with. Sometimes it was not having the right business model, not even having the skill sets in some cases to know how to lead a team. And how to grow your organization. So there's been lots of hurdles over the last 10 years through different iterations. But that's kind of part of it. And that's also the thing that gets me excited in the end. And I'm sure Lawrence feels the same way too, because you can't be an entrepreneur if you're not excited to also go through those hurdles and those failures, because they're learning opportunities, every single one of them. And there's so many different ways that you can grab a new lens and a new understanding from one problem.
Yeah. How about you, Lawrence? What are some of the failures you look back on and are grateful for?
There's
it's a
so
weird
many.
question. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many. It's hard for me to pinpoint one, but we all rise to the level of our incompetence, right? In terms of we hit that ceiling based on our level of expertise, and the only way you break through that is to work through that failure, learn from it. Don't make the same failure twice, but learn from that and just grow your depth. I fly. You can see it behind me here. I fly hobby planes. And part of that experience is crashing them and rebuilding them and learning. And so you really got to embrace that, right? You really got to be okay with your assumptions either proving out wrong or correct. And even the things you think you've got dialed in are gonna throw you for a curveball. Our early day stuff, but we thought we had our user interface dialed in. It was so clean and easy. And then, man, we put that in front of some users, and they're like, "Yeah, this sucks. You really need to do some fine-tuning." And you're just like, "What?" Lesson learned.
Yep.
A few hours of design work and some really good thinking there will save you a few weeks of programming and building. So, you don't know what you don't know until it hits you square in the face. And
Definitely.
and I think you just need to embrace that, learn from it, be better. And you know what? You probably learn that you can do it cheaper and faster in a different way, anyways. When you take a moment to look at it, and so failure is just part of the gig, and embrace it and be okay with it and laugh with it with your pals and your buddies and your partners and your staff over tea and coffee or beverage, whatever the case may be, and just chuckle and say, man, we really messed that up, but we learned something. And then there's those things you can't control, right? Like the internet goes down. I mean, we a couple of years ago, the internet went down on the East Coast, and we paid the price for that in rolling outages, and are right in the middle of a key historic vote for a First Nation, totally outside of our control. Nothing we can do about that. We just got to ride it out. And in that case, it was, just clear communication with our client, and having solutions in place to kind of help mitigate. And that responsiveness, I think, to when failure happens is really important. Don't leave your client and the folks that are paying your invoices questioning or wondering what's going on. Keep them in the loop. Be honest about things that are happening, and you'll find that will build a long, renewable relationship for a very long time.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. In this virtual time, this conference alone, believe me, we problem solved a whole bunch of things even prior to even having the problem. So we have some questions up on the board, and those of you that are student ambassadors, start getting your classroom questions into the phone and popping them up onto the board. We do have one which says, when do you know what you want your job or career to be? Is this something, I've asked it before about, was there a moment that you knew you wanted to create a business versus go work for someone else? I know, Mike, you started off with not started off with your master's, but that was the last educational piece you did, was a master's in education. So people would think you'd want to be a teacher, and you're a teacher in a different way, I guess.
Yeah. Honestly, when I was young, when I was in like elementary school, I wanted to be an inventor. And then when I got into middle and high school, I wanted to be a film director. And so it's shifted so many different times where I started learning more about other opportunities, other types of roles, responsibilities, jobs. And I just kept pursuing them. So I went and worked in the film industry for a little bit in Vancouver. I did a bit of my own schooling and my undergrad on that as well. And then I wanted to create an underwater documentary, which then led me to diving and creating underwater live stream programs to kids just on the surface. And then that became all of a sudden live streamed to classrooms because friends of mine who were teachers were like, could you do this for my kids? Okay. And then I ended up doing a master's in education, curriculum and instruction, learning about, how could I create something that's, in an educational format, but it's edutainment, it's fun, it's exciting, it's cool. And that's where I went and pursued that side. And then that then grew and evolved into what Live It is, where we do that not just from underwater, but from any environment, from any place in the world.
So in our
sorry.
I was going to say, in our pre-talk, you shared a story. I want you to share it about you in high school, or was it high school that you ended up doing a film? Share that story. Yeah. Because I think it's interesting students to know that.
We had a project that was we were reading Macbeth from William Shakespeare, and we had the Mick Masterpiece Project is what it was called. So I decided that I wanted to make a movie of it. So I created a bunch of like armor that I was painting. I got a bunch of friends together, and there was like 30 of us out in like this farm field. Then we're basically like all dressed up with wigs and everything else. We've got like swords and spears, and then we reenacted one of the battle scenes. And then in another clip, I totally did this. I borrowed my mom's fur coat, and we used it as like the fur blanket to try to make it authentic. I got the idea from Peter Jackson, but so we were recreating just fun moments and scenes, and honestly, the experience of going and doing that and working with everybody to pull it off, it just turned into such a wacky, fun project, but one that I definitely remember.
But that's the thing in high school,
definitely propelled me.
Yeah. And it can start as early as high school, and now you're doing productions for Live It. So I'm looking at the time, and there's lots of questions popping, but I didn't want to leave without, you mentioned about Indigenous space, Lawrence, and I wanted you to share something we had talked about previously as well, about using that, I guess, we have lots of students here from all over the Northwest, a lot of Indigenous students. We actually have, I think, a group from the Northwest Territories. I don't know if you guys managed to log in. They definitely wanted to hear this talk here. Could you share maybe some of that, your experience of actually being Indigenous and leading a company that now services Indigenous communities? So.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. We, as an Indigenous company, we want to make sure that what we're doing, what we're building from design to deployment to business, everything is through that Indigenous lens. And all that means is that lived experience helps us be better designers and developers and build better tools and better solutions for our clients. Because we don't, as Indigenous folks, we don't, and as an Indigenous person and owner of this company, and I spent a good 20 plus years being a band manager or executive director or some kind of senior capacity with First Nations organizations. We were always taking software or solutions off the shelf that were built for folks that had that had some utility, but we're only using 20 or 30% of that tool because the rest of it doesn't really work for us, doesn't really apply to us, or it doesn't take into consideration that Indigenous perspective in terms of how things are done or why things are done, the language that's used, right? And so either by design or by accident, sometimes these solutions that are available to Indigenous folks only perpetuate systemic racism, only perpetuate isolation and oppression of Indigenous folks, and don't recognize or appreciate the history of Indigenous folks for time immemorial in Canada. And we're like, okay, we're going to do it differently. We're going to build an Indigenous technology company that's owned by Indigenous folks, that has a majority of Indigenous people working in it, and we're going to create a corporate model where that's protected and where that's looked after, so that it's always Indigenous in ownership and in practice. In terms of a culture of the organization, that's always looking through that lens to make sure that what we're providing is built specifically for Indigenous people in this country, so that it's meaningful. It has, and that's the real value proposition, that hey, this is for Indigenous people, built by Indigenous people, by people who have that lived experience and understand what it means to be Indigenous, and the history and all the history that goes along with that. And we're just really proud to, at a time and place where we're able to do that. And we have some real great investors like Raven and others who have that, and Varshney Capital, who have that Indigenous, allow us to do that. And in fact, embrace it and celebrate it with us. And just a powerful stuff. And I couldn't be more privileged and thankful for the opportunity to do so, for sure.
Thank you. So we do have some questions popping up here, and so I'm just looking at them now. We won't get a chance to answer them all, so definitely, hopefully you two will be okay heading back onto Huva, answering some of those questions. It's funny, someone has asked, do you have any other business ideas? And I think one of the things we learned through here is a big part of it is each of you have followed your curiosity. I mean, Mike, your story from high school all the way up, obviously there were seeds of film production from as far as an English assignment all the way now to the productions that you do with Live It. And then same with you, Lawrence. It's not so much finding a business idea that you are just passionate about, but actually following your curiosity and realizing you need to create a business around it to make it happen, kind of thing, because no one else is doing it, or you're using it to problem solve. And so thank you both so much for being on this call and for answering these questions. There's definitely more questions for you to answer. I can see them all popping up as I'm going. Do we have time for one more? Okay, we have time for one more, supposedly. So, okay, let me just read here. When did you first know when you had to pivot or change? We kind of answered a bit of that, but was there a moment that you realized, that you had to pivot your businesses? Or, I guess you couldn't travel, so yeah.
Definitely. It became very apparent early on, towards the beginning of March. We started kind of seeing a trend. And we actually had been reaching out and in contact with organizations that we were going to work with, that we had plans to do programs with. Those were starting to shift. And so we had to come up with, in 3 weeks, a way that we could either continue with them, or we were going to have to let them go and reconvene later on. So I don't know about you, Lawrence, but I definitely I like to find a way. I like to creative problem solve, and we've got some cool people on the team that help us do that. So we knew early on we had some time, and we figured let's just give it a shot. So yeah, definitely early March was kind of the mark for us.
How about you, Lawrence? Was it a clear sign? Someone sending you a neon sign?
Yeah, there's those external forces that force you to either pivot or die, right? Yeah. So those will be evident, right? And you better have a good team with you to help figure out how to do that. To Mike's point, your team is really important. And then there will be those things with your client or your business development or whatever that looks like, those internal things where you'll start getting some data that will start to indicate that, okay, these things are not going as we thought. And good data is really important. So, making decisions, business decisions around good data, as opposed to, in addition to your gut, is important. But one or the other in isolation is never a good thing. So, I got to tell you, early on, a lot of folks told us not to go down the fintech path, and I was like, no. Anecdotally, I get a lot of support for it. And then so we started to create some data that would support that. Yeah. But we got a lot of advice to say not do that. And we just ignored it because we had a gut feeling that it was good. And then we got data to support that. But, use the data, use that experience, and use your network and your clients to tell you what they need and what they want, and build something around that.
Perfect. That's what we teach in our course. It's definitely about validation and learning that skill. And I feel that even, there's some kids listening here that think, I'm never going to build a business. I don't need the skill sets that you're talking about there. But really, problem solving, and if you have a problem and you think you have a solution, going out there and asking people and surveying kind of how this all lands is an important skill to have. So regardless of whether you want to be an entrepreneur, I think that mindset of understanding what is those resilient skill sets that we need in order to make it through life, let alone a business, is important. I'm going to ask you one last question. Did your family and friends support your business idea? Was that a big part of it? Because you guys both talk about great teams, but prior to starting a business with team, it would have been individually just you on your own. Was it because of great family support, or was it maybe they were the reason you became successful because they didn't help you? Like, what was your story in there? Lawrence, you want to?
Yeah, just on that last point, because I think it ties in, is that I have a concept that we use with our staff, but also in our family unit, and it's trust but verify.
Yeah.
I bounced ideas off my wife all the time, and my family, and got their input, and 100% support. I mean, I'm one of the ones where I couldn't have done this without the family support, even from initial family investors, that friends and family round. That's proof of life of you and your business model. Go borrow some money from family, even if it's just a few $100. That will help verify what you're doing. So trust but verify, and sometimes your family's blood, sometimes it's just those closest to you. I think having that support, regardless of how you classify that, is just really important. And you'll need it, because you'll have days where you're down and out, and then there'll be days of huge celebration, and you need someone close to you to share that with, for sure.
Perfect. So be nice to your parents, folks. Yeah. So, Mike, you want to end with that and just kind of
sure.
Support-wise,
really,
before it
really
was your
good
team?
points within that. Initially, my parents always thought that I was kind of crazy. With some of the earlier ideas, I was definitely more of just passion, excited about different projects, and wanted to pursue them. As things have kind of continued on, definitely family became very critical and important. I come from a family of divers, and when I wanted to do an underwater documentary, I really connected a lot more and deeply with my family. And they supported me to create the tech, to create the experiences, everything along the way, and even just being the cheerleaders in the background, when you go through those tough, rough patches of just like, oh my God, what am I doing? But, the thing is like, if you love it and you want to go after it, why not? Why not take the risk? And there's good friends and people you're going to meet along the way that are also going to share that with you. And you'll also probably support them. And so it's kind of circular in that way.
Yeah, well, definitely. Always surround yourself with people that can pull you ashore. So we'll end with that one. So if you two could head on to Whova and try to answer some of those questions, because they are popping up and we just don't have enough time in this session to answer it. But I want to thank you both for your time, and also just your commitment to our entrepreneurial community and our students right across this province as well as Northwest Territories. So thank you so much. Okay, take care.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.